Welcome to Current Affairs for Beginners. First, let us see the answers for the questions from our yesterday's video. The first question is, which of the following objectives regarding National Electronics Policy of 2019 is or are correct? The first one is to promote domestic manufacturing and export of core electronic components from India. This statement is correct. The next one is to create a sovereign patent fund to promote the development and acquisition of intellectual properties in the ESDM sector. Even this statement is correct. Both of them are the objectives of this year's National Electronics Policy. So the answer here is C. Both are correct. The next question is, which of the following statements is or are correct with regard to coral reefs? The first statement is they are found in tropical waters only. This statement is incorrect because they exist in both temperate and tropical waters. The next statement is coral reefs are developed in warm and shallow waters. Yes, this statement is correct because coral reefs are found where the waters are warm and clear. The next one is Great Barrier Reef is the largest coral reef in the world. This statement is also correct and it is in Australia. So as only 2 and 3 are correct, the answer here is B. Now let's start our today's session. These are all the topics that we are going to cover in our today's video. The first article is 48,239 crore package for 12 banks cleared. This article comes under GS paper 3 under the topic of economy. From this article, we are going to see what is meant by this recapitalization. First, we know what is meant by this capital. Capital is the money that is put by the owners for running an enterprise. Whereas recapitalization means it is a process where the venture of the owner or the shareholders will infuse capital to make the particular firm financially strong. So this recapitalization is a strategy for enhancing the financial base of an entity in order to overcome a rough financial situation or to improve its financial health. Whereas in case of these public sector banks, recapitalization means injection of capital mainly through the investment by government in order to financially strengthen those public sector banks. Because government is the major shareholder of these public sector banks. So it is its responsibility to add capital to those public sector banks if their financial situation is worse. The next article is the continuation of first article. In this article, now we will see what is this PCA and what are these NPAs and how this recapitalization will help the banks to tackle this non-performing assets problem. First of all, what is this non-performing asset? We know that for a bank, the loans that were given by it is considered as an asset. So if the principal or the interest or both the components of that particular loan were not given back to the lender, here the lender is the bank, by the customer, then that loan is considered as non-performing asset. So any asset which stops giving returns to its investors for a specified period of time is known as a non-performing asset. Generally, that specified period of time is 90 days in most of the countries and across the various lending institutions. Even in India, it is the same. So if a particular loan which stops giving returns to the bank for 90 days, then that particular loan is considered as a non-performing asset. So now, how this recapitalization will help the public sector banks to tackle this issue of non-performing assets? In case of these public sector banks, their non-performing assets, that means the debts, will be replaced by the capital from recapitalization by the government. So the banks, once they obtain these funds, they can remove the bad assets, that is loans, by using the fund from this recapitalization. So the government is aiming to recapitalize the troubled public sector banks that are restricted to give loans after falling under the Reserve Bank of India's Prompt Corrective Action Framework. So, what is this Prompt Corrective Action Framework? These are the corrective actions that will be imposed by the regulator. Here, the regulator is the RBI on the banks that breach certain risk thresholds. So, what are those risk thresholds? The first parameter is capital to risk weighted asset ratio or capital adequacy ratio, and the other one is net non-performing assets ratio, and the other one is return on assets, which is nothing but profitability. We have already seen what is meant by this NPAs. Return on assets means the profits. If we give loan, we'll get interest, which is the profit for our investment. So if these profits, that is our return on assets, is negative, that means we are not getting even the amount that we have spent in return. If we are getting these negative profits for 4 consecutive years, then also this PCA will be invoked on the bank. If this net non-performing asset ratio is above 12%, then also this PCA will be invoked. And the fourth one is leverage ratio. So once this PCA is invoked by the regulator on the banks, then it will halt the branch expansion and it will stop the dividend payment, and it can even limit the bank's lending limit to one particular entity or the entire sector. Some of the other corrective actions can be imposed on banks, like there can be special audits or restructuring operations and activating a recovery plan. And even the bank's promoters can also be asked to bring in the new management. So these are all some of the restrictions which the RBI can put on the bank once this PCA is invoked. And the next one is, where are the green crackers? Supreme Court. This article comes under GS paper 3 under the topic of environment. From this article, now let us see what are these green crackers. We know that air pollution is increasing day by day, and in order to curb that air pollution, the Supreme Court has suggested to use green crackers on Diwali. Why these are called as green crackers? Because they will not contain any harmful chemicals that will cause air pollution. They are environment friendly, so we can say that green crackers are less harmful compared to the conventional firecrackers, and less pollution emission will result in reduced air pollution. In effect to this, the CSIR scientists, that is the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research Scientists, have developed less polluting green firecrackers like SWAS, which means Safe Water Releaser, SAFAL, that stands for Safe Minimal Aluminium, and STAR, that stands for Safe Thermite Cracker. They have developed these less polluting green firecrackers. These firecrackers are 15 to 20% cheaper than the conventional ones, and they eliminate the usage of, especially this STAR, eliminates the usage of potassium nitrate and sulfur, whereas the SAFAL has less usage of aluminium compared to the commercial and conventional firecrackers. And who gives approval to these firecrackers to come into the market? It is the Petroleum and Explosive Safety Organization, which is known as PESO, will approve. It has to give its approval for these crackers to be come into the market, and it is the nodal agency which looks after the safety requirements in manufacturing, storing and transporting of all types of explosives. The next article is more symbolic than punitive. This article comes under GS paper 3 under the topic of economy. From this article, here we can see about a concept known as most favored nation. In the international economic relations and international politics, most favored nation is a status or level of treatment that is accorded by one state to another in the international trade. This term means the country which is the recipient of this treatment must receive equal trade advantages as the most favored nation by the country whichever is granting such treatment to the receiver state. And these trade advantages include low tariffs or high import quotas. Here, just by the name, don't get confused that we are saying that most favored nation status is given to one country, but it doesn't mean that we are discriminating other countries from getting these tariff barriers. According to this MFN principle of WTO, this MFN principle means it has to treat all the other members equally as most favored trading partners. It leads to equal treatment among countries and it ensures a more stable, predictable, reliable and competitive international trade. This will allow each country the greatest access into the other's domestic markets without any hindrances of tariffs or quotas. The next article is the private sector in public health. This article comes under GS paper 2 under the topic of governance and the subtopic here is issues related to health. From this article, we can see what is meant by this sustainable development goals. First of all, we should know what is the concept of sustainable development. Sustainable development means it is the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So it will take into account both present and future generations without over exploitation of natural resources and environmental degradation. So now, what are these sustainable development goals, which is also known as Agenda 2030? These are adopted by all the member states of United Nations in 2014 and they describe a universal agenda that applies and must be implemented by all the countries whoever have adopted this. Just now we have seen about what is meant by this sustainable development. So in order to achieve this, all the member states of United Nations have adopted this 2030 agenda. That is, they have adopted some sustainable development goals. And they are total 17 goals under which there are 169 targets that has to be reached. So now what is India doing in order to achieve these sustainable development goals? And students, it is important to know what are these 17 goals. Here there is the goal 3 which talks about good health and well-being, whereas the first one is no poverty and second one is zero hunger. Fourth is quality education, fifth is gender equality. I have listed down all the 17 goals in the notes. Please do refer to it. So now, as India has also adopted these goals, then what India is doing? The agency or the organization which is monitoring whether these sustainable development goals are being achieved in the country or not is Niti Aayog. So in this process, the Niti Aayog has developed a baseline report on the Sustainable Development Goals India Index. This is the first time India has developed an index and measured the progress of sustainable development goals among the countries. This index was developed by Niti Aayog in collaboration with the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, Global Green Growth Institute and United Nations in India. This index is a composite score for each and every state and union territory based on their performance across 13 out of 17 sustainable development goals. You can ask, what about the 4 other goals? For those 4 goals, there is no information that is available from the states. So as there is no adequate data, these 4 were not taken into consideration. The aim of this index is to instill competition among states in order to make them improve their performance across social indices, because the state's progress will determine the country's progress towards achieving these goals by 2030. Using the index, states will be monitored on a real-time basis. And the next thing that we can see from this article is, here there is a mention of a program known as Ayushman Bharat. Till now we have seen a segmented and sectoral approach to address health in the country. But now there is a program which will have a comprehensive approach for primary, secondary and tertiary healthcare. Under this program, there are two components. The first one is primary healthcare. This primary healthcare, which provides child and maternal services and services for non-communicable diseases. The component is health and wellness centers. These centers will provide free drugs and diagnostic services for the problems that I have mentioned just now. That is childcare services, maternal services and non-communicable diseases. Whereas to address the secondary and tertiary issues, there is another component under this program which is known as Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. This program was launched in order to reduce the financial burden on poor and vulnerable families for the amount that they have been spending on health. This program aims to help nearly 10.7 crore poor and vulnerable families who are from rural areas and also the urban workers who are in the unorganized sector. And these beneficiaries will be identified based on socio-economic and caste census data. Under this program, each and every beneficiary household will be allotted with 5 lakh rupees per year, and this amount can be used based on a family floater basis. That means it's not mandatory that it should be divided among the family, but if there is any health issue for one member in the entire family, that one particular member can use the entire amount that was allotted to that entire household. And under this program, there is no age limit, there is no age cap, or there is no limit among the family members. Here, the priority is given to female child and women. So we can say that it is a socially inclusive program. And under this program, the beneficiaries can avail services all over the country in all the public and empaneled private hospitals. Not under every hospital, but only under the listed private hospitals. And the next one is China promises constructive attitude. This article comes under GS paper 2 under the topic of international relations, and it also comes under GS paper 3 under the topic of internal security. From this article, we are going to see about two things. One is G20 summit and the other one is 1267 Committee of Security Council. First of all, let us see about this G20 summit. G20, it is group of 20 countries, which is an international forum of finance ministers and central bank governors of industrialized and developing economies. In the starting, when it was initially established, it was a forum of finance ministers and central bank governors. They used to discuss the key issues in the global economy. Whereas since 2008, this group has expanded, and the head of the government and states along with their finance and foreign ministers were also meeting at the summits. And this G20 summit is an annual summit where they discuss the key issues in the global economy. The significance of this G20 summit is these G20 members, they make up 85% of the world's economic output and 2/3 of its population and 75% of international trade and 80% of global investments in the area of research and development. Some of the facts that we need to remember regarding this G20 means this G20 has no permanent headquarters and no permanent staff. All organizational and logistical arrangements for meetings are handled by the country whichever is currently presiding over the group. The G20 members are Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, Mexico, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, South Korea, Turkey, UK, US and the European Union. It has the 19 of the world's largest economies as its member. The 20th member is this European Union, which is represented by whichever country holds the European Union presidency. And this G20 has two tracks. One is the finance track and the other one is Sherpa track. In the finance track, it comprises all the meetings with G20 finance ministers and central bank governors and their deputies. Here, they focus on financial and economic issues like monetary, fiscal and exchange rate policies, infrastructure investment, financial regulation, financial inclusion and international taxation. Whereas in the Sherpa track, they focus on the broader issues such as political engagement, anti-corruption, development, trade, energy and climate change, gender equality, etc. The recent G20 summit was held in Argentina in the area of Buenos Aires, and the 2019 G20 summit is going to be hosted by Japan. And in 2022, for the first time, India is going to host this G20 summit to mark the 75th anniversary of independence. And the next one is 1267 Sanctions Committee of United Nations Security Council. Before getting into this, we should know that there are three committees that deal with the counter-terrorism. They are Al-Qaeda Sanctions Committee, and the other one is Counter-Terrorism Committee and Security Council Committee. All these committees, they compose of member state representatives from 15 members of the United Nations Security Council. Among these 15, 5 are permanent members. They are China, France, Russia, UK and US. And they have the veto power, using which they can place a proposal on technical hold. Whereas the other 10 members were rotating members. So now, what is this Al-Qaeda Sanctions Committee? Initially, when it was established, it dealt with both Al-Qaeda and Taliban. But now it is only dealing with the sanction measures applied to the designated individuals and entities that were associated only with Al-Qaeda. This Sanctions Committee is popularly known as United Nations 1267 Committee. As I said that it deals with the individuals and the entities that are associated with Al-Qaeda. So if an individual or a terrorist organization is included in this list, it will help in restricting their movement, imposing financial penalties and freezing their assets. India has been asking this committee to designate Masood Azhar as an international terrorist and freeze his assets and travel ban. But China, being a permanent member, using its veto power to hold this proposal, because of which this Masood Azhar, who belongs to Jaish-e-Mohammed, is not being listed as international terrorist. The next article is GST Council extends returns filing deadline. No decision yet on reality. This article comes under GS paper 3 under the topic of economy. From this article, now we are going to see about a concept known as GST Council. We know that the Constitutional 101st Amendment Act has added Article 279A in the Constitution. As per this article, GST Council has to be constituted. So what is this GST Council? It is a joint forum of center and states. It consists of the central government and all the 29 states along with 2 union territories, that is the New Delhi and Puducherry. And this council comprises of Union Finance Minister as the chairperson, and the other member from the center is Minister of State for Finance, whereas Vice Chairman will be one of the State Finance Ministers and the other members are State Finance Ministers. So this GST Council will take decision based on consensus or voting. Consensus means all the members, the center, the states and the 2 union territories will agree to a particular decision. Whereas when it comes to voting, in case if any 1 or 2 states disagree with the decision, then they will go for voting. In voting, the center has the weightage of 33.33%, which is 1/3 vote in the council, whereas the states, which includes 29 states plus 2 union territories, has the weightage of 66.67%, which is 2/3 weight in the council. So based on the majority, any decision related to this GST will be taken by this GST Council. The decisions can be like which goods and services have subjected to or has to be exempted from the GST tax and under which slab a particular good or service should go. Now let's see at today's prelims questions. The first one is related to the prompt corrective action framework and the other one is 1267 United Nations Sanctions Committee is related to which among the following. Try to answer these questions and tomorrow we'll see a detailed explanation for these questions. And this is the Lloyds Loans website where you can access the notes for this video. Thank you.